Coco Gauff has made a big mistake after the Australian Open, which was proven in her latest defeat. Coco Gauff has made an error after her disappointment at the Australian Open. Gauff lost in the quarterfinals of the Australian Open, losing to Alina Svitolina in just 59 minutes. There was a lot of controversy after Gauff was caught smashing her racket on camera, but she chose to try and put this behind her at the Qatar Open. After losing her only match in Doha, Gauff has proven that she has made a big mistake after the Australian Open. Coco Gauff should have copied Jessica Pegula and Madison Keys. The Qatar Open is the first WTA 1000 tournament of the year, but many players including Aryna Sabalenka, Naomi Osaka, Jessica Pegula, and Madison Keys chose not to play in Doha. However, Gauff did not follow some of her top players and instead decided to play the Middle Eastern swing. This appeared to be a surprising decision for Gauff, who has struggled in recent years in both Doha and Dubai. Gauff would have benefited more from practicing at home ahead of the Sunshine Double of Indian Wells and the Miami Open. Despite this, Gauff appeared to be in a good position to return to winning ways at the Qatar Open, as she was drawn to play against lucky loser Elisabetta Cocchiaretto, who she had never lost a set against in their 3 previous meetings. Suggesting that there is still a hangover from the Australian Open, Gauff suffered a convincing defeat Cocchiaretto, losing 6-4, 6-2. Gauff has not won a match in Doha since 2023, and she has proven that she should not have traveled to the Middle East. This view is echoed by Gauff's former coach Brad Gilbert, who responded to someone suggesting the same thing. Gilbert wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter, "Good call. The 2-time Grand Slam champion can still choose to skip the Dubai Tennis Championships, which would be advisable for Gauff. But after traveling all the way to the Middle East, it feels more likely that Gauff will also compete in Dubai." Gauff has achieved better results in Dubai than in Doha over the years, but another early loss could be more damaging than skipping the tournament altogether. When did Coco Gauff last lose to a lucky loser? As well as continuing her poor recent record in the Middle East, Gauff has also made unwanted career history. Cocchiaretto suffered a convincing defeat to Varvara Gracheva in qualifying for the Qatar Open, but received a spot as a lucky loser after McCartney Kessler pulled out of the draw in Doha. Gauff has now lost to a lucky loser for the first time in nearly 5 years, with Cocchiaretto inflicting unwanted career history on the American. The last time Gauff lost to a lucky loser was at the 2021 Eastbourne International, when she was beaten by Anastasia Sevastova. Gauff has also missed an opportunity, as she would have played against another player ranked outside the top 40 in her compatriot, and Lee. Instead, Gauff will have a lot to reflect on as she has a big decision to make about her participation in Dubai. In tennis, mistakes are rarely loud. They don't announce themselves with torn ligaments or broken rackets. Most of the time, they arrive quietly, disguised as ambition, confidence, or the age to improve just a little bit faster than the clock allows. Coco Gauff's post-Australian Open season has begun to feel like one of those moments, where the mistake is not obvious in the making, but unmistakable in the result. Her latest defeat didn't expose a lack of talent. That would be absurd. Nor did it suggest a collapse of belief or effort. What it revealed instead was something more subtle and more dangerous for a young champion: impatience with a formula that was already working. After the Australian Open, Gauff stood at an interesting crossroads. She was no longer the teenage prodigy chasing validation, nor yet the fully settled champion who trusts her instincts without question. She was in between, successful enough to feel pressure to evolve, young enough to believe evolution must happen immediately. That's where the mistake crept in. Rather than doubling down on what made her dominant, clarity of patterns, defensive discipline, and emotional control, Gauff appeared to reach outward. More aggression, earlier risk, bolder shot selection. On paper, it made sense. Modern tennis rewards those who take time away. Champions are expected not just to win, but to overwhelm. Yet in practice, the shift came at a cost. In her latest loss, the margins told the story. Unforced errors arrived in clusters. Points that once would have been extended, neutralized, or flipped through patience were instead ended prematurely. The rally tolerance that had worn opponents down began to wear on Gauff herself. It wasn't recklessness. It was overcorrection. This is the paradox of young greatness. When you win early, improvement feels mandatory, even when stability might be the smarter path. Every loss becomes proof that something must change, even if the loss itself is simply part of the sport's natural rhythm. For Gauff, the Australian Open wasn't a failure. It was a checkpoint. But the response to it suggested she treated it as a warning. The mistake wasn't technical alone. It was philosophical. Tennis rewards clarity more than complexity. The best versions of great players are often the simplest. Serena imposing, Nadal grinding, Djokovic absorbing and redirecting. Gaff's strength has always been her ability to absorb pressure and then choose her moments. Recently, those moments seem forced rather than chosen. The instinct to assert dominance too early has dulled the weapon that made her so difficult to beat. Her refusal to give opponents easy air. What makes this mistake big isn't the loss itself, but the direction it hints at. Tennis history is full of players who tried to skip stages of growth, mistaking aggression for maturity. The game doesn't punish ambition, but it does punish haste. You cannot rush comfort. You cannot fast-forward instinct. Still, the most important part of this story is what the mistake is not. It is not permanent. It is not irreversible. And it is not uncommon. If anything, it may be necessary. Great players often need to feel the sting of a misjudged turn before they learn how to steer properly. Gaff's defeat may end up being less a setback than a recalibration, a reminder that evolution doesn't mean abandoning your base, only strengthening it. The aggression can stay. The intent can stay. But it must sit on top of patience, not replace it. Coco Gauff is still ahead of schedule by any reasonable measure. The danger lies only in believing she needs to be ahead of herself. Mistakes like this don't define careers. They define chapters. And for a player as self-aware and resilient as Gauff, this chapter feels less like a warning sign and more like a pause. A chance to remember that sometimes the fastest way forward is standing still long enough to trust what already works.